Hey there, incredible listeners. You know life has a funny way of testing us. It throws curveballs, builds walls, and sometimes it tries to shrink us down, make us feel small, especially when the world isn't ready to see us for all we are. We've all faced moments that bruised our spirit, moments when we were dismissed, doubted, or outright disrespected simply because of who we are. But what if one of those moments, a moment of glaring injustice, became the very spark that ignited a phoenix, allowing you to rise stronger, richer, and more powerful than anyone could have imagined today? I'm going to tell you the story of Darius Thorne, a man of vision, intellect, and profound dignity, a young black law student battling crushing debt and systemic prejudice who was offered an unthinkable path out. He married a 75-year-old millionaire philanthropist hoping to save his family. But just 7 days later, he would learn a shocking truth about his inheritance, a truth that transformed a perceived gift into a monumental personal battle. This isn't just a story about unexpected fortunes. It's a profound journey of resilience, a masterclass in turning insult into ultimate triumph. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or been told you don't belong, then buckle up. This story is for you. The chill of a late autumn evening bit at Darius Thorne's exposed neck as he trudged up the cracked concrete steps of the old apartment building. The fluorescent hum from a flickering streetlight above did little to dispel the gloom. His backpack, a worn, faded canvas relic, dug into his shoulders. But it wasn't just the weight of his law textbooks making it heavy. No, that backpack carried the invisible crushing burden of his family's survival. Darius, at 24, was already a man etched with the quiet resolve of someone who'd seen too much hardship. His sharp mind, honed by countless hours in dimly lit libraries, was a weapon he wielded against the formidable odds stacked against him. But even the sharpest intellect couldn't pay the medical bills that piled up faster than the autumn leaves outside. It had been nearly 2 years since his father, a pillar of strength and laughter, had been suddenly cruelly snatched away by a rogue aneurysm. His passing hadn't just left a gaping hole in their hearts. It had ripped a colossal, irreparable tear in the fabric of their lives, leaving Darius, the eldest, to stitch it back together. He pushed open the creaky apartment door, the familiar scent of simmering rice and canned vegetables doing little to warm the cold knot of worry in his stomach. It wasn't much, but it was home. His younger brother Jamal looked up from his homework sprawled across their tiny kitchen table. "Hey Darius, you're late again," Jamal chirped, oblivious in his youthful innocence to the full weight of his brother's world. "Thought you said your shift ended earlier tonight." Darius forced a tired smile, setting his bag down with a weary sigh. "Got caught up, Jay. How's that science project coming along?" He tried to keep his voice light, masking the tremor of exhaustion. Their mother, Grace, emerged from the cramped kitchen, her movements slow and deliberate. Darius's eyes immediately went to her, to the faint flush on her cheeks, the way her hand instinctively went to her side. He saw the subtle tremor in her fingers as she poured water for Jamal, the way she winced imperceptibly when she thought no one was looking. Her diabetes was worsening, and the insulin wasn't doing enough. The mounting medical bills, already a towering inferno, threatened to consume them entirely. Grace, his mother, a woman forged from steel and sunshine, was slowly, painfully fading. And Darius felt utterly, terrifyingly helpless. He was a law student, yes, but in the hallowed, often intimidating halls of the city's most prestigious law school, he felt like a perpetual outsider. He was one of a scant few black students, a stark figure in a sea of privileged faces. He'd endured it all, the sideways glances in lectures when he offered a nuanced legal argument as if his intellect were an anomaly. He remembered vividly Professor Davies, a notoriously stern constitutional law expert, stopping mid-lecture to grill him specifically on a complex clause, then dismissing his accurate answer with a curt, "See me after class, Thorne." A subtle implication of suspicion rather than praise. He'd seen classmates visibly tense when he approached a study group, quickly closing their circles, their hushed conversations about ski trips and trust funds suddenly ceasing. He'd even had a university career counselor subtly steer him away from corporate law internships, suggesting perhaps community advocacy might be a better fit, a soft, patronizing way of telling him his background wouldn't quite fit the corporate mold. Each dismissive comment, every averted gaze, chipped away at his spirit-planting seeds of doubt. But more profoundly, they fueled a simmering resentment, a fierce, quiet resolve. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Grace, about Jamal, about all the countless others like them who were systematically overlooked, underestimated, and crushed by a system that was never built for them. He felt the profound injustice of it all. The constant need to prove his worth, not just as a student, but as a human being. The weight of his worn backpack felt heavier burdened not just by books, but by the hopes and dreams of a family and a community desperately needing a champion. He knew deep down that he was meant for more than just surviving. He was meant to fight. And he was getting ready to throw his first punch. He just didn't know yet that the opening would come from the most unlikely place imaginable. The invitation to the charity gala sat on Darius's makeshift desk, a glossy anomaly amidst his dog-eared law books and overdue bills. His co-worker Jordan, a well-meaning but often oblivious associate, had pressed it into his hand with a casual, "Great networking, Thorne. You should really go." Darius had almost laughed. Networking, he barely had time to sleep, let alone navigate a world of champagne flutes and forced smiles. His only suit, a dark, slightly faded relic from his father's closet, felt more like a costume than proper attire for a high society event. "I don't even have anything to wear." He'd mumbled a weak excuse that barely concealed his deep-seated reluctance. The thought of walking into a room full of the very people whose casual privilege felt like a constant reminder of his own struggles made his stomach clench. But Grace, ever observant, sensed his hesitation. "Darius?" she said softly that evening, her voice thin but firm. "Sometimes opportunity doesn't knock, son. Sometimes it leaves an invitation on your desk." She looked at him with eyes that held the wisdom of decades of hardship. "Go. Even if it's just to see what that other world looks like. You never know what doors might open." Jamal, too, added his youthful plea. "Yeah, Darius. Maybe you'll meet someone who can help us." Their hope, fragile yet persistent, was the only currency Darius had left, and it was enough to compel him. And so Darius found himself that Saturday evening a stranger in a strange land. The ride from his humble neighborhood to the sprawling estate was a journey through different realities. The towering wrought iron gates, almost invisible against the twilight, seemed to guard more than just a property. They guarded an entire way of life, manicured lawns stretched endlessly, adorned with sculptures that probably cost more than his entire law school tuition. Luxury cars gleaming like polished jewels lined the expansive driveway. Stepping out of the old taxi, Darius felt a stark chill, far colder than the autumn air. The very air here, thick with the scent of expensive perfume, and the hushed murmur of polite conversation, felt alien. He overheard snippets. The latest merger. My villa in Tuscany. The political landscape in Washington. This wasn't his world, he knew it instantly, and he doubted it ever would be. He felt like an imposter, a ghost drifting through a dream, the borrowed suit doing little to erase the invisible sign on his forehead screaming, "Doesn't belong." He tried to blend to become invisible, navigating the crowded room, a champagne glass he didn't want feeling awkward in his hand. He was counting the minutes until he could respectfully slip away when he felt a gaze. Not dismissive, not curious, but piercingly, unsettlingly direct. It came from an elderly woman seated quietly in a plush armchair, observing the room with an almost regal stillness. Her eyes, sharp and clear despite her age, met his. There was no judgment, no pretense, just a deep, almost unsettling insight. She motioned him over with a delicate gloved hand. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," she said, her voice surprisingly strong yet soft, a hint of something warm in her tone. "Am I wrong?" Darius, caught off guard, could only manage a wry smile. "You're not wrong, ma'am." And yet, she continued, her gaze unwavering. "There's a fire in your eyes, a quiet determination. What brings a young man with such a spirit to an event like this, if not by choice?" Something in her directness, in the way she saw him without pretense, disarmed him. He found himself speaking slowly at first, then with a dam-breaking urgency. He told her about Grace's failing health, The mountain of medical bills, Jamal's bright future hanging by a thread, his father's sudden passing, and the crushing pressure at law school. He spoke of the quiet, insidious racism, the constant need to prove his worth in a world designed to exclude him. He recounted the professor's subtle dismissal, the closed circles of classmates, the career counselor's discouraging advice. He didn't ask for help. He simply laid bare his truth. The woman listened, her expression unchanging, a deep empathy radiating from her. When he finished, she simply nodded. "My name is Eleanor Vance," she said, "and I know what it's like to witness the world's indifference, to see the disparities that privilege often blinds us to." She paused, her gaze distant, then returned to his. "Many years ago, a young black man, not much older than you, saved my life from a tragic accident. He asked for nothing in return. That act of selfless courage from someone society had systematically disadvantaged shattered my previous blindness. It opened my eyes to the deep injustices in our world, to the disparities I had been comfortably ignorant of. Since that day, I vowed to use my resources, my influence, to level the playing field for those denied opportunity, to ensure that no one suffers simply for who they are or where they come from." She looked at him again, her eyes piercing him to the core. "You remind me of him, not just in spirit, but in that same quiet strength, that determination, that heart." Darius felt a tremor of something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. A small, unfamiliar warmth bloomed in his chest. In this opulent alien world, he had found a kindred spirit, someone who saw not just his burden, but his potential. He didn't know what it meant, but Eleanor Vance, a woman of immense wealth and profound wisdom, had just laid a seed of possibility in his weary soul. A possibility that would in the coming days blossom into a proposition so shocking, so utterly unbelievable, it would redefine his entire existence. Darius returned home that night, but sleep refused to claim him. Eleanor Vance's words, "You have the heart and the strength to make a difference," echoed in the silence of his cramped room. He tossed and turned, replaying their conversation, the warmth of her gaze, the strange connection they'd forged. It was unsettling, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life, once a predictable, agonizing struggle, was on the precipice of something unknown. The next morning, as the city was still stretching awake, Eleanor's familiar, elegant voice came through his phone. "Mr. Thorne?" she said, her tone calm and steady. "I'd like you to come to my home. We have more to discuss." Darius's heart pounded. What could she possibly want? Anxiety gnawed at him, a mix of apprehension and a nascent, terrifying hope. He borrowed Jordan's beat-up car. The contrast between its sputtering engine and his last night's luxurious taxi ride felt like a cruel joke. He pulled up to Eleanor's sprawling estate, the very gates that had once seemed to mock his humble origins, now opening as if by magic. The air here was pristine, silent, a world away from the city's ceaseless rumble. He found Eleanor in a sun-drenched conservatory surrounded by exotic plants. Her usual poised demeanor was replaced by a solemnity that made his stomach clench. "Darius," she began, her voice unwavering, "I don't have much time left." She spoke of a terminal illness, a quiet enemy consuming her from within. Darius's breath hitched. He hadn't expected this. She wasn't just a benefactor. She was a woman facing her end. Then she dropped the bombshell, her words echoing through the stillness of the conservatory like a sudden, unexpected thunderclap. "I want you to marry me." Darius froze, his mind reeling. "Marry you?" He stammered the words, catching in his throat. The absurdity of it. Marriage. To a woman decades his senior, a millionaire he'd met just once, his initial reaction was pure, unadulterated disbelief. It felt surreal, incomprehensible, like a scene ripped from a fantastical dream. Every instinct screamed at him, "No, this isn't real. This isn't how things work." Eleanor observed his shock, her expression empathetic but resolute. "It's not about romance or tradition, Darius," she explained, her voice steady. It's about a partnership, a practical arrangement. I have a vast estate and a foundation built over decades dedicated to fighting the very injustices you speak of, to ensure my life's work continues, and to bypass the complexities and delays of traditional inheritance. This is the simplest, most direct way to transfer my assets and, most importantly, the leadership of the Vance Foundation into capable, compassionate hands. She looked directly into his eyes. Your hands. She laid out the facts, cold and clear, yet imbued with immense purpose. Your mother's medical care will be fully covered for life. Your brother's education will be secured. And you, Darius, you will have the resources, the power, and the platform to make real, tangible change in the world. To fight for people like your family, who are often overlooked and crushed by the system. This isn't charity for you. It's an investment in the future I believe you can build. Darius listened, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The weight of his family's suffering pressed down on him, battling against his ingrained sense of pride, his yearning for a normal life. Marrying Eleanor would solve everything instantly. It would lift the crushing burden from his shoulders, save Grace, give Jamal a future. But it would mean sacrificing his autonomy, his personal dreams of building his own life, his own career on his own terms. It felt like selling his soul, a desperate bargain he never imagined making. This was the impossible choice, one that could save his family, but at the cost of his self-respect, his vision of who he was meant to be. That evening, the decision felt like a lead weight in his gut. He knew he had to talk to the only person who truly understood the depth of his despair and the immensity of his love, his mother, Grace. He found her sitting by the window, the last rays of sunlight painting her frail figure in hues of gold. "Mom," he began, his voice hoarse. I have something to tell you." He laid out Eleanor's proposal, the words tumbling out, laced with a mixture of disbelief and desperation. He saw the confusion clouding her eyes, then a flicker of pain, and finally, a profound sadness. "A marriage of convenience," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Darius nodded, looking down at his hands, ashamed. "It feels wrong, Mom. Like I'd be selling myself, selling us." Grace was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the fading light outside. Then she reached out her trembling hand, finding his squeezing it with surprising strength. "Baby," she began, her voice thin but imbued with the hard-won wisdom of a life lived through struggle. "You've been carrying this family on your back for too long. Since your daddy passed, you haven't lived for yourself, not truly. You've lived for us." She looked at him, her eyes filled with an unspeakable love and a quiet resolve that mirrored his own. Sometimes, good men have to make tough choices for the people they love, for the future they dream of. This isn't about selling your soul. This is about being brave enough to accept a path that saves everything. It's about letting go of pride so you can do what's necessary. Her words were a balm and a jolt. She wasn't judging him. She was freeing him. Her pragmatic love, her unwavering faith in him, cut through the noise of his own internal struggle, silencing the whispers of doubt and the superficial judgments of society. Grace knew the true cost of poverty, the constant soul-crushing despair. She knew this was the only way. Her tears, now flowing freely, were not of sorrow, but of release. "Take this chance, Darius," she urged, her voice thick with emotion. "For all of us. For your future." In that moment, Darius understood. This wasn't a defeat. It was a sacrifice. An unforeseen sacrifice, yes, but one born of the deepest love. He nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over him. The decision was made. He would marry Eleanor Vance. He would walk this unexpected path. Little did he know this seemingly straightforward choice would lead him to a twist so profound, so utterly shocking, that it would redefine not only his inheritance, but the very meaning of legacy itself. The journey he was embarking on was far more complex and far more challenging than he could ever imagine. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur, a surreal whirlwind of legal documents, hushed arrangements and fittings for a tuxedo that felt more like a costume than an outfit for his own wedding day. Eleanor, efficient and precise, even in her frail state, orchestrated everything. Darius felt like a ghost, a spectator in his own life watching a movie unfold that he was somehow inexplicably starring in. He looked at himself in the mirror. A stranger staring back, a young black man in an expensive suit, about to marry a woman he barely knew, all for a future he couldn't yet grasp. The very idea twisted his gut. The wedding itself was a quiet, almost sacred affair. Held in the grand, sunlit parlor of Eleanor's estate, it felt less like a celebration and more like a solemn vow. Only Grace and Jamal, along with a few of Eleanor's closest and most stoic confidants, were present. Grace's eyes, though still reflecting a deep maternal sorrow for the path her son was choosing, held a reassuring warmth, a silent affirmation that he was doing the right thing for their family. Jamal, dressed in a sharp borrowed suit, looked on with a mixture of confusion and wide-eyed awe, too young to truly understand the gravity of the exchange. When it was his turn to speak, Darius's voice faltered a tremor of doubt. But then he met Eleanor's gaze, unwavering, filled with a quiet strength that transcended her physical weakness. "I do." He managed his voice, finding its footing. A soft, almost imperceptible smile touched Eleanor's lips. "Thank you for trusting me, Darius," she whispered, her voice surprisingly clear. The first few days of this new bizarre reality were a disorienting haze. The sprawling estate felt like another world, too vast, too quiet, too rich for a young man who had spent his life navigating cramped apartments and noisy city streets. He moved through its gilded halls like an echo, a guest perpetually waiting for a cue. But Eleanor, even as her strength waned, showed no inclination to let him remain idle. "No better way to learn than by doing, Darius," she'd often say, her voice firm despite its growing softness. She initiated him immediately. She took him on what she called the grand tour of her life's work. One afternoon, a sleek black car whisked them away from the polished quiet of the estate to the vibrant, bustling heart of a predominantly black neighborhood. They arrived at a sprawling community center, its walls painted with murals depicting scenes of hope and resilience. The energy hit Darius like a wave, children's laughter from a sunlit play area, the rhythmic hum of sewing machines from a vocational workshop, the rich aroma of spices from a community kitchen. This was where the Vance Foundation truly lived. Eleanor, frail but unwavering, walked through the center greeting everyone by name, her face lighting up with genuine warmth. Darius watched, mesmerized. He saw the genuine love and respect the community held for her. Gloria, the center's coordinator, a woman with a booming laugh and an even bigger heart, pulled Darius aside. "Eleanor built this place, young man," she told him, her eyes twinkling. "She doesn't just cut checks, she rolls up her sleeves. This woman saved so many lives, gave so many chances." Darius felt a profound shift within him. He'd known of her philanthropy, but seeing its tangible impact, feeling the vibrant pulse of lives genuinely changed, began to fill him with a growing sense of awe and purpose. One evening, as Eleanor grew weaker, she called him to her study. The room was filled with books, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and quiet contemplation. "Darius," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I've chosen you because you remind me of someone I once knew. You have the heart and the strength to make a difference to continue this work." She pressed a thick sealed envelope into his hand. "Everything you need to know about what comes next is in here. Promise me you'll carry this work forward. You won't give up." Darius, his throat tight with emotion, simply nodded, a silent vow passing between them. She passed away peacefully that night, exactly 7 days after their marriage. A quiet sigh escaped her lips, and then stillness. Darius sat by her bedside for hours, a profound sense of loss settling over him, complicated by the whirlwind of the past week. It felt surreal, like a dream that ended too abruptly. He returned to her study, the envelope heavy in his trembling hands. Inside, he found a heartfelt letter from Eleanor, reiterating her faith in him, her vision for the foundation, and a small, antique brass key. The letter instructed him to use the key to open a hidden vault behind a false bookshelf panel. With a mix of trepidation and morbid curiosity, Darius found the hidden mechanism, the bookshelf sliding open, to reveal a sturdy old safe. He inserted the key, turned the tumblers, and the heavy door creaked open. Inside, meticulously organized, were more ledgers, investment portfolios, and official documents. But nestled beneath them, a single stark memo caught his eye, dated just weeks before her passing. He pulled it out, his eyes scanning the urgent lines. His breath hitched. The blood drained from his face. This wasn't just an inheritance. This wasn't a stable, thriving empire. The memo laid bare a catastrophic financial crisis. A series of disastrous, undisclosed investments made by a previous, now-deceased financial advisor, coupled with a massive looming lawsuit from a disgruntled former partner, had quietly bled the Vance Foundation dry. It wasn't just on the brink. It was clinging by a thread, just weeks, maybe months, from complete collapse. Darius reread Eleanor's letter, her words about his strength, and her belief in his ability to make a difference. Now those words took on a terrifying, monumental new meaning. The gift, he had accepted the salvation he thought he had found, was in fact a colossal burden, a desperate last-ditch gamble. He had inherited not a legacy of wealth, but a legacy of fire, a foundation in dire need of a miracle. He had traded one burden for another, a far heavier one. The shock promised by the title wasn't her death. It was the revelation that he had married into a mission far more desperate, far more challenging than he could ever have conceived. And now alone in that grand study, with the city's distant hum, the only sound Darius Thorne, the poor black law student, understood the true crushing weight of his new inheritance. This was no easy path. This was a war, and he was now the general. The grand mansion, once filled with the quiet, comforting presence of Eleanor Vance, now felt cavernous, almost accusatory in its silence. The weight of her legacy, once a comforting thought, had transformed into a crushing burden, amplified by the shocking truth he'd unearthed in the hidden vault. The Vance Foundation, Eleanor's life's work, wasn't a thriving, stable empire. It was a crumbling edifice, teetering on the brink of financial ruin. The past few days had been a blur of documents, legal jargon, and the chilling realization of just how close to disaster Eleanor had sailed. A massive lawsuit from a disgruntled former partner, combined with a string of catastrophic investments made by a long-deceased financial advisor, had quietly siphoned away the foundation's reserves, leaving behind little more than a prestigious name and a mountain of debt. Darius spent hours poring over the ledgers, his law school training kicking in. But this was a crisis far beyond any hypothetical case study. His initial shock had given way to a whirlwind of emotions, a flicker of betrayal, a profound sense of overwhelm, and then a fierce, almost desperate determination. She believed in me to fix this, he thought, gripping the edge of the mahogany desk. She gave me this chance, even knowing the truth. I can't let her down. Not her, and not the countless people depending on this foundation. The weight of his worn backpack had been heavy. This was crushing. His first act as the new head of the Vance Foundation was to call a mandatory board meeting. The atmosphere in the opulent boardroom was thick with barely concealed skepticism. A lineup of seasoned executives, lawyers, and philanthropists, most of whom had known Eleanor for decades, sat around the polished table, their gazes cool, calculating. Darius, a young black man barely out of law school, felt their silent judgment like a physical force. "Good morning." Darius began, his voice steady, despite the tremor in his hands beneath the table. "As you know, following Eleanor Vance's passing, I have assumed leadership of the Vance Foundation." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing their unspoken doubts to coalesce. Robert Hayes, an imposing white-haired man who had served on the board for over 30 years, cleared his throat. "Mr. Thorne," he began, his tone dripping with polite condescension. "We respect Eleanor's wishes, of course, but with all due respect, your lack of experience in managing an organization of this magnitude, let alone its intricate financial portfolios, is a significant concern for the board." The unspoken question hung in the air. What could this young man possibly know? Darius didn't flinch. He reached for the letter Eleanor had given him on her final day. "Eleanor knew my experience, Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice gaining strength. and she chose me precisely because of it. She saw not just a law student, but someone who understands the struggles this foundation is meant to address. He read Eleanor's poignant words from her letter, her unwavering faith in him echoing in the silent room. Her belief in me wasn't naive. It was deliberate, and I intend to honor it with every fiber of my being. He then shifted, looking at each board member. I will be transparent with you all. The foundation is facing significant challenges, financial and otherwise, but I am here to lead us through them. Linda Grayson, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had been a loyal ally to Eleanor, leaned forward, her expression initially skeptical, now tinged with curiosity. That's a bold claim, Mr. Thorne, she challenged. But claims don't pay bills. We need results. What are your immediate plans? Darius, having spent sleepless nights preparing, didn't hesitate. My immediate plan is to streamline our operations, review every single expense, and most importantly, refocus our efforts on our core mission: direct community impact, especially in the most underserved neighborhoods. We will expand our outreach programs, particularly those focused on education and vocational training. That is what Eleanor built, and that is what we will save. He then proposed specific immediate actions demonstrating not just theoretical knowledge, but practical, decisive thinking. The internal battle wasn't the only front. External skepticism reared its ugly head at every turn. At a high-profile fundraiser Eleanor had planned months ago, Darius found himself navigating a shark tank of the city's elite. One particularly portly, red-faced donor, swilling champagne, cornered him. "So, you're the young man who inherited the Vance fortune." He chuckled, his eyes scanning Darius with a condescending sneer. "Quite the leap from wherever you came from. Hope you're up to snuff, lad. These big foundations, they're not just for any ambitious young man, if you catch my drift." Darius felt the familiar prickle of anger, the subtle racist undertone designed to diminish him. But he remembered Grace's wisdom, Eleanor's faith. He took a deep breath, meeting the man's gaze directly. "Ambition, sir, is what drives progress," Darius replied calmly, his voice firm. "And indeed, I came from a place where ambition is often the only currency available." Eleanor Vance believed that anyone, regardless of their background, could make a difference. "That's a belief I intend to honor and frankly expand upon." He walked away, leaving the donor sputtering. He knew these confrontations would be endless. The weight of this burden was immense. Some nights, sleep still evaded him. He'd retreat to Eleanor's study, the same room where he'd discovered the truth, and pull out her journals. He found solace in her meticulous handwritten notes, her candid reflections on navigating a world often resistant to change. He'd read about her own moments of doubt, her strategies for dealing with stubborn board members, her unwavering commitment to justice, even when facing overwhelming odds. Her words became his silent counsel, a wellspring of strength. True leadership, he realized, wasn't about avoiding crisis. It was about leading through it. It wasn't about simply managing assets. It was about confronting entrenched biases, both internal and external, and earning respect through an unwavering commitment to a cause larger than himself. The crucible of command was searing, but Darius Thorne was beginning to forge himself anew. The first month under Darius Thorne's leadership was a relentless uphill battle. The financial crisis he'd inherited was a silent, insidious enemy threatening to unravel Eleanor's life's work. But Darius, forged in the fires of personal adversity, refused to yield. He initiated a series of aggressive yet strategic actions. He worked tirelessly with Linda Grayson, the sharp attorney on the board, who, after witnessing his transparency and decisive plans, had become an unexpected, invaluable ally. Together, they renegotiated crippling contracts, secured emergency bridge funding from a smaller, more community-focused philanthropic group Eleanor had once supported, and ruthlessly streamlined administrative costs without touching a single program that directly served the community. It was a delicate dance, balancing fiscal responsibility with Eleanor's profound mission. But Darius was learning fast, turning his law school acumen into real-world solutions. He understood that trust once broken was painstakingly rebuilt. So he didn't just issue directives from his new grand office. He went to the front lines. He spent more time in the community centers, the shelters, the schools, than he did in boardrooms. He wanted to see it, to hear, to feel the impact firsthand. One sweltering afternoon, he visited the Frederick Douglass Community Center, a cornerstone project of the Vance Foundation in a historically underserved neighborhood. The center, a vibrant hub of activity, had received funding for a new after-school tutoring program. As Darius walked through the buzzing classrooms, he saw children, many from backgrounds identical to his own, their faces alight with curiosity, engaged with dedicated tutors. In one corner, a young girl no older than Jamal was meticulously drawing complex legal scales in a notebook. "Are you the man who helped our school get these new books?" she asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of shyness and awe. Darius knelt to her level, a genuine smile softening his features. "I'm part of the team that helped," he said, his voice gentle. "But it's people like your teachers, and you working hard, who make the real difference." The girl beamed, her excitement palpable. "I want to be a lawyer someday," she declared, pointing to her drawing. "Like my mom says you are." A lump formed in Darius's throat. He remembered the subtle dismissals he'd faced in law school, the unspoken assumptions that his background precluded him from such aspirations. "You can be anything you want to be," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "Just keep working hard, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That moment, a simple exchange with a child, reaffirmed his purpose, reigniting the fire within him. This was why he fought. This was the legacy. His dedication wasn't just inspiring the community. It was slowly, painstakingly winning over the skeptics within the foundation itself. At a staff meeting, after Darius presented a detailed plan for expanding a scholarship program, Linda Grayson, the initially skeptical board member, approached him. "You've surprised me, Darius," she admitted, a rare, genuine smile gracing her lips. "I didn't think you had it in you, but you're proving me wrong every single day." It was a hard-earned compliment, a testament to his persistence. Other board members who had once viewed him with suspicion now listened intently, their questions shifting from doubt to genuine engagement. Darius also began to put his own stamp on the foundation, initiating projects that resonated deeply with his personal experiences. He launched the Thorn Mentorship Program, connecting promising young Black students from underserved communities with established professionals in law, tech, and business. He remembered the isolation he'd felt in law school, the lack of role models who looked like him. This program was his direct answer to that systemic gap. He also spearheaded a new legal aid clinic, offering free legal services to low-income families facing eviction or employment discrimination, a direct extension of the fight he had always envisioned for himself. Not all encounters were uplifting, however. The subtle racism he'd faced before still lingered, often cloaked in polite, insidious language. At a high-profile donor gala, a prominent older philanthropist known for his old money connections pulled Darius aside. "You've got a lot on your plate, young man," the donor drawled, his tone dripping with condescension. "It's admirable that you're trying, but don't you think this is a bit ambitious for someone with your background?" He paused, letting the implication hang in the air, a silent jab at Darius's race and humble origins. Darius felt his jaw tighten, but he forced a polite smile. "Ambition, sir, is precisely what drives progress," he said, his voice steady, his eyes meeting the donor's gaze unflinchingly. "Eleanor Vance believed that anyone, regardless of their background, could make a difference. That's a belief I intend to honor and, frankly, to prove." The donor, clearly unimpressed, merely raised an eyebrow and walked away. Moments like these were difficult, a constant reminder of the battles still to be fought, but they only strengthened Darius's resolve. He focused on the faces at the community center, the young girls sketching legal scales, the families he was helping to keep their homes. Those were the people who truly mattered. Back at the estate, Darius would often retreat to Eleanor's study, her journals becoming his sanctuary. He'd read her reflections on overcoming obstacles, on facing down skepticism, on the sheer persistence required to enact change. "Change is never easy," she had written in one entry, "and those who fight for it are often met with resistance. But the only way forward is to persist, even when the odds seem insurmountable." He took those words to heart, using them as a mantra. He was no longer just Eleanor's successor. He was her steward, her legacy, but also increasingly his own man, forging his own path, one that honored her vision while reflecting his unique perspective. The impact was unfolding slowly but surely, not just in the Foundation's thriving projects, but within Darius himself. The stage was now set for a powerful culmination, a testament to a legacy reimagined. Months melted into a year, then another, each one marked by the relentless hum of progress at the Vance Foundation. The tireless work, the strategic decisions, the quiet battles fought against skepticism and systemic bias, all culminated in a momentous day. The Eleanor Vance Vocational Training Wing, a gleaming new addition to the Frederick Douglass Community Center, was ready for its grand opening. It was a tangible testament to Darius's unwavering vision, a physical manifestation of hope, forged from the brink of despair. The air buzzed with excitement. Local politicians, community leaders, and hundreds of families filled the central hall. Grace, looking healthier and more radiant than Darius had seen her in years, sat in the front row, Jamal beaming beside her. Linda Grayson, now one of his staunchest allies on the board, gave him a reassuring nod. The murmurs died down as Darius approached the podium, the weight of the moment settling over him. He looked out at the sea of faces, many of them black, many of them young, their eyes mirroring the dreams he once held, the struggles he had overcome. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice resonating with an authority that was no longer forced but earned. "Exactly 2 years ago, I stood on a precipice. My family was struggling, and I felt utterly alone, fighting a battle I thought I couldn't win." He shared his journey with a raw honesty that captivated the audience, the chance encounter with Eleanor, the shocking marriage proposal, the initial feeling of sacrificing his identity, and then the earth-shattering revelation of the Foundation's hidden crisis. "I inherited not just a legacy, but a monumental challenge," he admitted, his gaze sweeping across the room. "But Eleanor Vance, in her incredible wisdom, saw something in me. She saw a fierce determination forged in struggle, a unique perspective shaped by adversity. She believed that I could not only save this foundation, but transform it into something even greater." He spoke of the countless hours, the initial resistance, the subtle yet insidious prejudice he faced from those who doubted his capability because of his background. "But change doesn't happen overnight," he declared, his voice rising. "It happens through persistence, through dedication, and through an unwavering faith in the power of people." He pointed to the vibrant facility around them. "This vocational wing will provide tangible skills leading to better jobs and brighter futures. It will build bridges where walls once stood. It will empower our young people to dream bigger, just as Eleanor empowered me." The applause that erupted was deafening, a visceral roar of support and recognition that brought tears to Grace's eyes. It wasn't just for the building. It was for the man, for the journey, for the spirit of defiant hope. After the ceremony, as the crowd mingled and celebrated, Darius shook hands, his heart swelling with a profound sense of fulfillment. A young man barely out of high school approached him, his eyes shining. "Mr. Thorne," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I saw your story online. I never thought someone like me could do something like this. This center, it's going to change everything for me and my family. Thank you." Darius looked at him, seeing a reflection of his own younger self, burdened, hopeful, and now inspired. "You can do anything you set your mind to," Darius said, placing a hand on the young man's shoulder. "Never forget that." Later that evening, the mansion settled into a gentle hush. Darius retreated to Eleanor's study, the quiet sanctuary where his life had irrevocably changed. He sat in her worn leather chair, the scent of aged paper a comforting presence. He picked up her final journal, his fingers tracing the familiar script. He reread her last entry, the words echoing through the stillness. "Darius, the world is not an easy place, but it is full of beauty, resilience, and the boundless capacity for change. Carry this work forward, my son, not out of obligation, but out of love for the people we serve. Let your own lived experience be your compass." Darius closed the journal, the words settling in his heart like a quiet flame. He no longer felt like an imposter, no longer merely a caretaker of someone else's legacy. He had poured his heart and soul into this, transformed a crumbling vision into a thriving reality. He understood now that Eleanor's true inheritance wasn't just about the foundation or the projects they funded. It was about the people whose lives they touched, the hope they inspired, and the belief that even the smallest act of kindness, born from profound